Today, me and Tete are going to be talking about this book, which is a book that I was introduced to during my first year at university. That is the University of Toronto. And this book, if you can't see this clearly, is From Ancient Writings to Sacred Texts, the Old Testament and Apocrypha by S.A. Nigosian, who was my professor during first year university for one of my bird courses, which is a very easy course, as people call it. And basically for these courses, there's not a lot to study, but this was very interesting. I learned a lot about history and how you can interpret myth from this amazing professor and his work. So as you can see here in the screen, I found a Google Books version of the book. So we'll be going through the table of contents and basically just kind of talking about how this book impacted you as well, Tete, because I sent you a copy of this book I think a few months ago.
Yes,
And
you
why
did.
I had two copies of it, it was because when I was buying the book, back in 2011, I actually had bought one of the copies already in first semester, and this was a second semester course, so it started in January, so around this time of the year, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
then I didn't remember that I had already bought a version back in September, so I bought another version of it, right,
Oh my
in
gosh.
January, and then I brought it home. I was like, oh no, I actually have two versions of this. So for
Oh,
many years, I was looking for a chance to give it away to someone, but I didn't know anyone who would be interested in something so esoteric.
and that was such a stroke of fortune because I have loved this and um ever since a young age I've loved this. I've always loved this sort of thing, ancient myth. Just because it sets the foundation for how we think, how we function as a society. A lot of people don't realize how much we owe to mythology and what it plays in our psyche and our society and everything.
Absolutely. So yeah, I just saw that on Instagram. A number of people have started coming in, and you guys, if you want to hear what Tete is saying and want to see the full screen, you should go to YouTube because unfortunately, I still have not mastered Yellow Duck and some of the other third-party apps that allow you to stream through Instagram because they require a lot of work. So you guys will have to go to Twitch, Twitter, or YouTube to see the full screen version of this and hear what Tete is saying.
Yeah, like she said, go to YouTube. You'll be able to hear me talk and, just enjoy the full video. And we hope that you guys find this, interesting and are hopefully will be fascinated as we are and have been by this particular subject.
Absolutely. So yes, back to here. So basically, how did you find this book when I first gave it to you?
When I first opened it, I was excited. I guess to give a little bit of background, I had grown up in a rather religious household, but um, I never really got to fully appreciate the origins and the fullness from which the religion that I practice, I guess, sort of still practice a little bit, which is Christianity. I never got to appreciate its origins that much, and then there's this sort of faux thing coming out that's been around for a while where people are claiming that they're trying to show the original, but they're not. And I really wanted to know the real core of it. And so when I first saw this and its real origins and everything, not just sanitize things to fit for a certain mindset of politics or region or mindset, um, and I was very happy. I loved it. I loved delving into just the pure Mesopotamian culture and the different nuances and how it relates to all the other ones, which, you know, they may not be related per se, but, through commerce, trade, and law, there is this common string of thread and ideas are being shared. And it's pretty interesting how, most people would assume, oh, this is very monotheistic, but there's so much polytheism in it. And it's very fascinating and everyone's different approach to it and who's putting priorities on what deities and things like that. And the concepts of life and law and how these are formed, from not only myth but history, and history being influenced by myth, by either repeating a pattern, averting a pattern that was found in a myth. And also too, the importance of how writing systems were developed and shared, like, cuneiform, um,
Hmm.
and even like, Phoenicians figuring out an alphabet, which, we can pretty much say, first alphabet,
Exactly, right. And this book, as I recall, doesn't only cover the Bible, but also Mesopotamian myths, which, you have been exploring in your work with Andrei, who is very inspired by the Epic of Gilgamesh in general.
Yes, yes, he is. Andre has been very much inspired by the epic. It's been his favorite. It's been one of his favorite literature things to read, besides the uh, the Passions of Lermontov. Uh, so those are two things that Andre likes, are Mesopotamian epics and things by Lermontov. And
Hmm.
and Andre can draw some comparisons to what happens in the epic with his own life. And I think that's the beauty and strength of myth, that no matter how many eons of time pass, myth will always touch upon the bare cruxes of humanity, the core concepts and experiences of humanity. And I think that's why myth is very endearing. Whether that gets reinterpreted or reinvented in so many different ways, it does, but it stays with us, as long as humanity retains its humanity. And I think it helps us keep an eye on what it means to be human, even if it is epics about gods and such, because I think the experience of divinity and divinity existing only exists in the context of humanity being there and present and at its core for its existence.
That's true. So we're going to be reading a little bit of the book's summary, so you can see it here. And
Right.
basically, it says, let me see it. The books constituting the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible have a complex history of authorship, resulting in a variety of styles, perspectives, and meanings. The authors and editors of the books that became the Bible lived through the political vicissitudes of a region that was a cultural crossroads, subject to successive waves of invasion, settlement, and influenced by a variety of civilizations. Consequently, their works reflect the diverse political, intellectual, and literary legacies of the ancient Near East, and in some cases, the incorporation of non Hebrew texts. S.A. Nigosian, a scholar of biblical and Near Eastern religions, explores the diverse literary antecedents of the Old Testament as well as the Apocrypha, the books excluded from the canonical Hebrew text but included elsewhere.
True. And it's sad to see with Apocrypha, I I did not get to read some of it until much later in life. That was kind of taboo, growing up, because it's dispersed from canon,
Hmm.
and but yeah, there's so much insight into it. There's so much insight that can be gleaned, and like they said, it does reflect the crossroads. It does reflect, the succession of, diverse, you know kingdoms and ethnicities and groups and languages and s- you know everything. It just reflects that it goes beyond a melting pot. It's just like this whole, it's like this organism of changing. And I think that reflects a lot on the formation of humanity as a whole in the world, as things develop and everything.
Right. So, in your view, which part of the book do you think is the most interesting? We're looking at the table of contents right now, so you can see, it starts with the history of biblical texts, and then the Pentateuch, which is, Genesis to Deuteronomy, and then history, poetry and wisdom, prophets, apocrypha, and then finally biblical authors, editors, and scholars.
I think all of it was equally fascinating. I think my favorite ones, though, were the first one, history of the biblical texts. Um, the other one I think I really enjoyed was the history, because I think a lot of times what people assume that they've learned of quote unquote biblical history, a lot of it is inaccurate, especially, like, say, if you live like me in North America with all the weird stuff going on that have been going on since like the 1600s. um, what people say, oh, this was biblical. And no, but you need to look at the real history and what happened in the context of something outside of that actual text. Look at another text from that same time written by someone on the other side. So I love the history there. I enjoyed poetry and wisdom because people, another part of society too is that, poetry is not what we think of it in the modern context, but I think poetry in those days was a way to, and I think always for a long persisting thing of how you view poetry and how people make and create poetry, is thinking of the world not governed so much by reason and logics or cold hard facts, but how it feels to the human spirit or soul, if you will, or how it ruminates in the psyche of the mind. So I think that's why a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's poetical," when they're really trying to say something flowery. But for me, when somebody says that's poetical, I think they're thinking of something that is not governed by, cold facts or hard logic, but rather the stirrings of the human soul and, the fabric of the psyche, because that in itself, while not always in conflict with cold reason and, hard logic, um, often transcends itself beyond that because it experiences something that cannot be put in equations or calculations.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, and here's Helleborn. She has joined, and I'm gonna see if it's possible to put a chat overlay here. Oh,
Yay!
somehow it's not working because when I say new comments, somehow it just says new comments will display. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna try now.
Okay.
So this is my first time using this. So
Okay.
thanks for joining, Helleborn. Yes, history of religions is fascinating. Yep. So you basically from now on, you guys can see the comments on this side. So, whenever they appear, we can just basically have a discussion on the side for all of our followers.
Oh my gosh, this is gonna be awesome. This is better than Twitch.
It is a lot better than Twitch. Yes. So, yes, we have 2 followers and it's amazing that you guys are joining in. Thank you so much. So, yeah, back to the book. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, we have learned so many things from this book and sometimes a lot of myths are not about cold hard facts, but they're speaking in terms of generalities and in terms of metaphor.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not always literal. It's always I mean, it could be for most parts a metaphor, and I think a lot of people fail to recognize that. And then that causes a lot of confusion, and then that kind of leads to unfortunate interpretations when there's a religious application upon society, and that can be a very dangerous thing.
That's very true. Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
yeah, how did you find the writing style of this book?
I love the writing style. It was approachable, it was easy to read, it was very reader friendly, but it was also succinct and composed that, like they could just sum up the author could just sum up the points right away and it would just instantly communicate to your mind. And I love that. This probably has to be the easiest like academic textbook that I've ever gone through. And I love the writing style. I love the warmth in it as well. I just sort of felt like I was listening to a good lecture that wasn't boring. That's how it felt. It felt
Mhm.
good. It was good, great quality, excellent communicating.
It is, yeah, 'cause when I was reading it as an 18-year-old, I really liked how he laid out all the information in a very story-like manner. Like, it's a little bit like world building, like we were talking
Yeah.
about previously in our podcast about Genshin Impact. Like, I'm just looking at his stuff right now, and as you can see, for example, he's talking about different kinds of material were used for writing in the ancient Near East: stone, rock, metal, clay, ostraca, potsherds, linen, wood, and then he lists all of them out. And then he talks about how Egyptians were doing this versus the different ethnicities like Persians and Mesopotamians. And he also quotes from the Bible: Joshua inscribing a copy of the Torah of Moses on stone, Joshua 8:32.
Right. Or, also too, like things that were of significance in a society, like laws or some event that somebody wanted to be remembered, or some rules that, a law code that had to be preserved. These were also inscribed upon stone, although sometimes metal, kind of like with the chest plates that were worn by the high priests, according to like the Mosaic law.
That's true, right. And I think it's good also that, even though he has footnotes, it's very beginner friendly in a way, like for people especially who are just starting university, because it's not overwhelming with footnotes like some of the stuff that you have seen, for example, in the other courses.
Right, right. The other courses, they are fantastic and great, and I enjoy them. But a lot of times the information, although streamlined, feels a little daunting because it's trying to cover so much and it's doing it in a very methodical manner, as opposed to, Nigosian here, who is doing this in a very story-like manner, because I think we can learn better if something's told in a story-like narrative as opposed to an academic streamline. And I think maybe that's why some people struggle with academic learning, because it requires a very different mindset. But everybody, almost everyone, can comprehend a storied narrative.
I think that's why a lot of people like first year university courses, because most of them are more streamlined, more story like, and also broader. But the further you go in university, the more niche it becomes. So then, by fourth year or, master's or PhD, it becomes so niche that sometimes, outsiders just don't understand what's happening.
That's true. That's true. They don't. Um, they don't, and it becomes so daunting for people who want to learn more. I do hope that maybe more academics will apply this style to the more advanced courses, because I don't think we should pride ourselves on complexity, but the efficiency of communicating and simplifying something that's complex. Because for me, I think that's the biggest achievement in attaining, like, whatever, um, like, even scientific achievement. It's just simplifying the complex.
Hmm. And we have a question here from Helleborn. She says, Fortunus, did you study this as a subject in university? Was the whole course about this? So, yes, I said, I studied this in university. It was just a fun short course I took back then because I wasn't even sure I was going to be majoring in history back in 2011. Back then, I was actually thinking of majoring in literature. But yes, this whole course was actually very short. It was from January 2012 to 2000 no to April 2012, and basically it was just this book. This was the textbook of the whole course, and we didn't even read all of it. Like, he just told us to read certain chapters, and then we wrote these very short essays about certain topics, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for your question, Helivorn. It's so awesome that you've joined us, and we love your questions and everything. So, I guess to ask. So, is it all right if I direct a question to Helivorn at the moment?
Yeah, sure, that would be really great.
Oh yeah, I was going to say. So, did you? And I can imagine with your studies that you probably had to study a good deal of mythology. How would you say the mythology that you studied, or that you incorporate in what you're doing, um, how do you interpret it, and how much does that play in your own writing and creativity?
Yeah, I think she's gonna take a while to respond since she's
Oh,
typing it out, but I'll respond to
please.
her question since she said, "That's very interesting. What else did you study related to the history of religion?" I had to, because I switched my major from literature to history in second year, so I did have to study some stuff about religion, but it was embedded into many courses, so it was not a specific course about religion. But for example, I did do the history of medieval Europe for it was actually first year. Yeah, because I did that as a preview of what being a historian or being a history major would be like. So for that course, which you have also seen the notes for, Tete, you said they were
Right.
very inspirational.
Very.
That one had a lot about religion because that one was the one that taught me that in medieval European society, people were divided into three castes, right? It was the knights, and then there was like a Latin term for each of them, and then you had the serfs, and then you had the religious people.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, there was this structure that I don't think a lot of, you know what I mean? Like, people don't take that into consideration whenever they think of medieval. And even when people are doing, like, quote unquote medieval fantasy, they don't even really take that into consideration, that there's nuances and complications and complexes within that structure as well. They just think of it as, black and white, and it's not.
Very true. Yeah, so I think that was pretty much it. Like that was limited to my study of religion, and then I read some stuff about monks. Like, we had some primary resources about what monks were writing. I also read a book in one of these broad survey courses in actually first year literature major, which was about I think it was a nun, Hildegund of Belgien. I forgot her name, but
Yes.
she was,
Oh my
yeah,
god.
she was a, and then there was also Christine de Pizan. She was also medieval, and I don't think she was a nun or anything, but she talked about how women were viewed in the society, and that also mentioned a lot about religion. And I also read Boethius, that first or second century Christian author.
Yes, yes, exactly. Some good solid stuff. And when you read these things, you're really shocked how modern it sounds and feels. Like, I mean, not trending modern, but like the foundations of modernity.
I think it's because I think me and Haliburn talked about this before too, because a lot of these people were living in cities and they did not have to spend most of their time toiling in the fields, right? And they were literate. So they were not really representative of their time, but I guess they were modern in the sense that they had time to think about these things. But other people who were not literate and they did not have the time to think about these things, it's very hard to relate to them.
That's true. That's true. It's very hard, and that's always amazing when you can see something and you realize, wow, that's modern, and then you're amazed by it because our minds kind of have this prejudice that, oh, something way back then, can't have any semblance of modern thought, but it does, and it has application, to a degree of its basic facts.
Oh, so Haliburn responded. She said Christine de Pizan was quite the feminist of the 14th century. Yes, that was what
Mm,
our professor was talking about. She was
yes,
saying that she was one of the biggest feminists, and that actually kind of impacted how women were seen in that time period. It's been a really long time since I last thought about it, but that course had a lot of interesting things. We were talking about Christine de Pizan, and then we jumped to Montaigne and his essays, which, speaking of modernity in an unexpected time, I think that was also, pretty modern because Montaigne's essays were basically very long rants about a lot of things he saw around him.
definitely, definitely so. I agree. And those are things that you wouldn't think people back then would think about, but they did. And I wish more people would see that. And I mean, I guess if you are learning academically, you do, but a lot of people don't. And then when they try to apply it to, like, say, medieval world building, it falls apart because it's so there's such a dissonance with what was really there, the actual history, and then what people are conjuring up in their minds because of like a prejudice misconception.
Right. And Hellimer just responded. She says, also, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy was part of my PhD study because it had a great influence on Anglo-Saxon writings about dream vision, which was the topic of my PhD paper.
That is so awesome. And I can definitely see that influence in your work. I think that's amazing how you've been inspired to incorporate that, and just sort of like blend it with that. I definitely see that. I definitely do.
Definitely. So,
Yeah.
what else about this book really stood out to you?
I think not only was it, I think it was also, you know, looking at the other side, like the different groups, like, because I have bad, I have bad ways of pronouncing these things, but let me look up the different groups, like give me a second.
You can use the
Or I can use
index.
the index. But yeah, I mean things like the different groups like the Hittites, um, the Phoenicians, um, Sumerians, all these different groups, and people don't, I mean, how do I say? Before I read this, I knew about some of these different groups because, like, when you're a kid and you're reading the Old Testament, there's all these groups, but you don't realize the significance of these groups because a lot of times, like, say you're reading the Old Testament or what you're given, especially in a lot of Bible interpretations that are out there, are very limited, and it's just like a passing name, like, oh, these were these ites, as I would call them, whatever
That's
ites,
true.
and these Huttites and Uttites and Uzites and all that. And but now you have a culture and a religious idea, as well as trade and commerce, that you can put, like a face to the name. And it's
That's
wonderful to
true.
humanize that and to realize the significance and complexity of it, because unfortunately a lot of people who, like, say, had been raised religious and things like that, as I had been, you don't realize the significance of it and the complexity, and how people blended a lot of things and worshiped different gods and kind of blended gods differently together. I mean, even Abraham himself, he was worshiping different gods before, at least according to what a lot of people get interpretation, he was told to do something else, go monotheistic,
Right. And Halliburton has responded to your question. She says,
Yeah.
my studies in history of religions influenced my stories quite a lot. Magic and religion are a great part of my writings. My take on it is realistic, so I explore what that religion meant for the people, how their religious experiences were. We see Valdis's and Eyolf's very different takes on magical practice, with Valdis believing she communicates with the spirits and divinity, and with Eyolf being very pragmatic about it.
He is.
We also see Aiden's struggles with religion, with the Norse one that he clashes with as well. Merwin's strong faith, as well as a lot of religious philosophy with Aiden and Ingvar.
Yeah, thank you so much for these answers. These are absolutely fantastic, and I love how you've incorporated that. Like, I see that in your work. I see that, with the various people, and what religion and the idea of religion means to a lot of people. Because I think it's so easy in our modern day, seeing the distortions and corruptions and problems that arise from such things. But we have to realize too that our predecessors, way back, way back, these these formulated and governed a lot of their lives, and it kind of gave them an identity and a sense of self as well, especially in a world that did not foster the idea of a sense of self, very harsh reality. And it everyone, it is a personal and subjective experience, and I think it will always be that way. And we see that, Valdis and Eyolf, very different. Valdis truly believes, in the valid divinity of what she is doing, um, while, Eyolf, of course, is pragmatic. He doesn't necessarily have doubt. I don't feel, but he's pragmatic about what is the practical results he can glean from it. And then, Merwin's strong faith, and, and it's a blend of this clash of, the new coming Christianity and the old ways. And then you've got the religious philosophy between Aiden and Ingvar. And I think struggles, I think a lot of people have religious struggles, and I think that's normal and healthy. There should be a struggle, because what is religion but it's at its definition, but to realign itself. So to realign, there has to be a lot of conflicts and questioning and go back to the drawing board for a lot of things.
Right. And I've taken away the screen share now, so it's just our faces because there's not that much left in the preview of the book on
That's
Google
true.
Books.
That's
So we'll
true.
just look through the actual hard copy if we want to discuss anything, I think.
Yes, definitely, definitely. We have our book right here. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, so that was a really great discussion. I totally agree. I mean, how they view religion, especially in such a setting like yours, Helleborn, a medieval, pre-modern setting, it does really influence their worldview and how their values are like as people, especially, with Valdis versus Eolf. We really see a stark contrast there.
definitely a stark contrast, and I think that can be reflected in how a lot of people view and use religion today. I mean, for better or worse. And I think, although we may assume that modernity has no place for religion, I think it does, because it reinterprets itself as philosophy or social and political ideas, or, machines or systems and things like that. Hey,
Thank you for
Liz.
joining, Riza.
Hey, Riza.
Yeah, and Helleborn also responded. She said, "Very true. Excellent analysis of how they feel about it. I tried to explore different views towards religion, but it's always present in my writings." And you definitely explored that really well, especially, also with the difference between Christianity and paganism, and how Ingvar is advocating against Olaf, kind of trying to convert Norway entirely to Christianity.
Definitely. That was a wonderful. I like that counter. We were just discussing sometimes it's a welcoming thing to see counterculture rise up, because I think in order for just societies to function, I think we need to have clashing and conflicted views, not just a one, you know, monotone viewpoint of everything.
Exactly, yeah. And, back then, like I said, religion did influence societies a lot. So it makes sense that, people would see each other in these categories. For example, a pagan versus a Christian versus, a pagan who practices Norse paganism in a particular way. For example, Valdis, who is more Finnic influenced, she is influenced by the Sami culture because she is half Sami, versus someone like Eyolf, who is actually kind of creating a little bit his integrating a lot of his own beliefs and his lifestyle into religion, because there were not that many male practitioners of magic, but he is someone who wants to bend gender boundaries and kind of create a name for himself. So this is how he becomes a male practitioner of magic.
Definitely. I love the challenge and subversion of that. I thought that was wonderfully handled and beautifully done. And I just love how Aof just comes in and challenges things with such confidence. Like, I love that. Like, go Aof,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, the world is his stage, just like Sam.
Yes, it is. It is his stage. It is. He does. And he commands it so well. Like, I don't know, Aof coming to town and promising me all this. I mean, I'd certainly be throwing, I'd be filling his coffers with coin.
Right. And Helleborn said, exactly. My fascination with religion is also why I chose that particular setting in my stories, the conversion of Scandinavia to Christianity. I love religious syncretism.
That is exactly religious syncretism. It's wonderful to see because it's wonderful to see this sort of living organism of things changing and molding and melding and differing and evolving. And I love seeing that, as well as different schools of thought, and like I said, I think there always needs to be clash and differences of views and opinions and interpretations and what it applies to people in their own personal experiences and contexts. And
Hmm.
it's wonderful to see that. And I love what you've done with your work, Hellevorn. It's I know I keep saying it, but by goodness, it is just masterwork. It really is.
Exactly. You guys really need to check out R.N. Ravele or Hellevorn's Lucky Wolf. You should check out her Instagram, which is at Hellevorn_Boar. Link in the description when I post it, and buy a hard copy of her book or a e-book of it, because it's also on Google Play.
Please buy it.
Just search Lucky Wolf and you will see it.
Please
Yeah.
buy it. It'll be a wonderful decision. You will love it. If you guys are interested in this subject that we're doing, or just a good historical epic or a good historical story, just get it. It is good. It is wonderful. She's an amazing writer.
Mm-hmm. And Helleborn said, "Yes, well said, Fortunus. Eyolf is creating his own and filling in the gaps. He thinks he's earned the right to take it upon himself to create a philosophy around their faith, but personalizing it. Thank you so much, Tete. It's a great honor."
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your work. And thank you for sending me a hard copy of your work. It is on my bookshelf, very proud.
Right. But yes, speaking of syncretism, it's not only Scandinavia, which was, one of the last places to be converted to Christianity in Europe. Actually, in the Anglo-Saxon setting, in Aiden's world, the UK slash the British Isles, there was a lot of syncretism too. And I think some people kind of forget about that when you always contrast Scandinavia with, mainland Europe. But there's actually syncretism in pretty much every society that came across Christianity. I don't know. In your experience, Tete, do you think evangelical Christian Americans who are Protestant have any kind of syncretism? I'm kind of curious to see that. Do you think there is any?
There is, but I'd rather not say what I think of it.
But what kind of syncretism would it be with? Is it New Age stuff? For example, like, Pentecostalism and, the holy laughter. Is that kind of a New Age thing?
You know, the problem is with evangelical Protestantism, and I'm not even going to go into like Catholic or anything like that. So I was so for those of you out there, you should probably know that I was raised in a very strict religious home. My mother was Catholic, Roman Catholic, the Latin American variety. My father had came from a Methodist family, but they were also Anabaptists, which were a Swiss sect of people that came over from Germany because they believed really heavy on baptism and lots of weird things. And you also get your Amish and Mennonites, so all that influences as well. But anyway, so my father family had been Methodist and Presbyterian at times, and everything else. And my father sort of got hooked on weird religious fanaticism, especially charismatic, which is more extreme than Pentecostal. Charismatic really believes in weird powers, like if you call something, it will be. Like it almost sounds like sorcery in a way. And however, there's a lot of problems with it. There's a lot of social and family problems with that, and I don't need to get into that. But I guess what to say is there is syncretism a little bit in the fact that some of them do try to incorporate some of these things here, but it's done in such a very in my view anyway, it's done in a very poor way. It's done in a very ersatz way. It shouldn't don't even do that. Why if you're not going to do it properly, don't do it. But they do it anyway, and they claim, oh, this is what they did in the Near East and whatnot, and that's not true. I don't think they were doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I would have to say evangelical Protestant America. I will not put my opinions on what I truly think of it, but I will say that it clashes a lot with what I personally have grown to believe. And I think it's detrimental to a lot of healthy discussions and healthy syncretism as well. And I think it causes a lot of problems, which plague American society, because then you have the reaction to it, which is the opposite, which also causes problems. American society's sort of a mess. I'll just put it that way.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, what kind of Bibles did you read growing up? Because, Nigosian does talk about different Bible versions that he quotes from. Let me see. But I remember him, putting in parentheses, this is from this version of the Bible. So, there's different translations. So, if you look at the back in his bibliography section, he talks about the Dartmouth Bible, the Good News Bible, the New American Bible, and like he has all these Bibles that he's been referencing, right?
Yeah.
So, have you read any of these?
Um, just a real quick thing. I just want to say, Riza, you're right. A mess is putting it mildly. But because I respect the audience, I won't say what I really think of it, but we all know what it is.
I
But
think a lot of us know, but we just don't want to say it. I mean, even I kind of know, even though I've never lived in America, because I did tell you about. I'll tell it to people who are listening, because this was mostly a private thing between you and a couple of other people. But
holy
when I
goodness.
was around 10 to 13 years old, I went to a private school that was Protestant Christian, and this was not in America. But we had one student, sorry, we had one teacher who was from Texas, and he's a really nice man, but he had a lot of strange beliefs. And I have gone to a lot of different churches because I grew up alongside a lot of different Christians in two different countries, but I had never seen such extreme, to put it mildly, beliefs. He told us in science class that evolution is not literal and we should never believe it, because he thinks that a lot of the fossils were fake and created by atheist scientists to test our faith as Christians.
And oh no, and then of course people of the left behind mentality.
Yeah, he played Left Behind during lunch break once, and I was like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, this is, it's fiction, but it's
No, no,
Christian
no.
fiction." And he was saying that,
This is
this is like really like
culturally
good research by two
coming.
biblical scholars who researched, the Apocrypha as well as Revelation, and then they created their own interpretation of what would happen in the 7 years before Jesus comes back, because in Christianity, Jesus is going to come back for Judgment Day. But according to a lot of American Protestant Christians, there's two comings. So before Jesus comes for Judgment Day, he's going to come a first time. So Judgment Day is the second time he comes. The first time he comes, I'm not really sure what happens, but basically a bunch of believers, like people who actually have accepted Jesus into their souls and hearts, they get basically, you know, kind of
That
turned
sounds
into
about right.
I don't
Right.
know what happens to them, but they disappear, and I think they go to heaven or something, leaving the rest of the world behind. And that's why it's called Left Behind, because most people, including people who call themselves Christians, but they don't follow this kind of Christianity, they're not quote unquote true believers, they get left behind too. So then basically they have to go through 7 years of an authoritarian government
The
led by the
tribulation. The
Antichrist.
tribulation.
No, the tribulation, right? Yeah, you remember.
I actually I recently have had involved in my family a member of clergy, if you will, and he's studied extensively on these things, and he says all of this interpretation is rubbish, it's nonsense. The whole thing of Left Behind is so inaccurate, and basically if you look at the real interpretation, there's no such thing as rapture. It was invented by some crazy poet woman in the 1830s. The real thing of it is that according to Christians in the vision provided to God, to the Apostle John on the island of Patmos, is that basically when Christ returns, the earth will be returned to God's domain. So we will have it originally like Adam and Eve. And if there's anybody that's going to be ousted, it will be those, who will be, I guess, united with the other guy on the other side. So basically, you want to be left behind, is basically what he was telling you. You want to be left behind. You want to be on the earth and say goodbye to the other people, because you want to be on the earth when Christ comes and returns with his dominion and thus restores the earth to the, former glory of heaven and everything.
Right. And I've told this to friends who are Christian or they, grew up Christian adjacent, but they were like, "What is this? I've never heard of such a weird ideology." And you're right, Riza. Did he escape a mental
That's what I
asylum by
want
any
to say.
chance? I questioned it too. I was like, "What am I hearing?" And this is a private school. My parents are paying, thousands of dollars
No,
for me to
no.
sit here to listen to this guy talk about how, oh, evolution's not real. I mean, how can a frog turn into a human? Ha ha. That's what he literally said.
What a
And then he showed
dumbass.
us this YouTube video, like it was of this guy from Texas who was a stand-up comedian, a Christian comedian. And he was talking about, like, he was trying to debunk evolution by just making all these ridiculous claims about, wow, a tadpole turns into a frog, not a human.
It's so much more complicated. And that's another thing too. It took me a long I was not allowed to have anything with evolution or anything that challenged anything. Um even certain books I read. Well, my parents were so strict. Well, not mostly my father. It was so strict that not only no evolution, but different kinds of sciences, but also too, no fantasy. Like, oh, even the Chronicles of Narnia were banned, and I had to beg and beg and beg to read the Chronicles of Narnia. And then my father's looking through. Oh, I guess it sounds Christian enough. All right, you can read it. But this was after
Right.
a lot of begging and
Risa
pleading.
was like slowly pulls out the straight jacket.
That sounds about right. No, quickly pull that out.
I
Quickly pull it out,
know. I
right?
was like, wow, this is really funny. Like, I couldn't stop laughing when I went home because I wanted to laugh, but I didn't want to get in trouble when he was talking. So I was like, this is really funny. And I told my parents, and they were like, we're going to pull you out of that
Pull
school.
out, pull it
This
out.
is worse than any
Stay,
public
let go.
school, right?
Even children
Yeah,
of
because,
yours
yeah, it's like you're paying for your kid to learn nothing and also get brainwashed by
get
this.
brainwashed by this maniac running loose and rampant. And that's why I said, you know what? Because of God, people like this guy and my dad and other people around me in rank profusion, if you will, um, it turned me away from religion for a long time, and I hated it. I thought it was a bad thing. I thought it was a restricting thing that hurt and harmed people. And I did see the effects of that too, because, unfortunately, a lot of like conversion and stuff ended up in like lots of murders and killing languages and identities and cultures and stuff. And I just thought, I don't want this anymore. But then slowly, especially as I sort of went further with my journey with Andre, and how he applies his ideas of faith, which are kind of nuanced and a little weird, but Andre's a little nuanced and a little weird himself in a good way. I sort of came back to loving it again, and I wanted to learn the real origins of it and the complexities. And now I'm just all on board for Near East Mesopotamian stuff. It's beautiful, and I think I can really see where we get the foundations for societal and political ideas. Even things like capitalism versus communism stem from these societies and what they think. Even mythos and such.
Right. And I think we're going to do a future episode about Superman and how you view his story as kind of, a groundbreaking modern mythos that's kind of modeled after these kind of mythologies, right?
Yes, definitely. There is a lot. I mean, I know people have seen a lot of incarnations, and I will say about 70% of what you see out there with media, be that comic books, animated, whatever, movies, a lot of it is not, I don't think, up to par with a lot of original ideas, and a lot of people who have interpreted very well. Um, for example, like if you want to go back to the original, very good solid concepts that you can glean a lot out of, to like say the modern stuff, like what Zack Snyder did with the DC cinema verse, which it just feels like brilliant mythos being reinvented and reinterpreted for modern audiences. And I love it. There's so much, there's a lot that I'm gonna have to get together my PowerPoint presentation. Not that I need
Hmm.
that, but you know what I mean.
We will do it very soon. I think, now that you're having a break, finally, we can do a lot of
Yes.
podcasting over the next, I think it's
7 days.
almost 2 weeks.
Yeah, about 10 days. I have 7 days this week. I'm on my second day of vacation, thank goodness. And then the next week I'll have 3 days off in a row, and I will relish this and use it to the best of my abilities for creating and making podcasts and sharing with this. So I'm definitely going to be doing my research, getting all my little things piled together, because with a mythos like that, you got to get sources and cite them.
Yeah, and you're gonna be doing so much on Andre's story. You already have been showing me so much over the past week, and you're aiming to actually finish his whole series or trying to finish his whole series within this break. I think it is indeed possible. You have
I can
suddenly
do
gotten so much inspiration, and what you just wrote earlier today actually made a lot of references to what we're talking about. So it's perfect because he did talk a little bit about one of these Eastern myths that he really likes, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yes, yes, he did. So Andrei, for in case you guys don't know, to sum up his story, Andrei is a former Don Cossack officer who loses his basically all his family, friends, and property and home when the communist Reds take over and employ the decossification policy in southern Russia and Ukraine. So as a result, Andrei is left in a very alien, foreign, almost hostile world to himself, and nothing makes sense to him now. Imagine, if you will, you suddenly have a home. You have a home, and suddenly it's not there anymore, and you can't go back to your old way of life. You can't go and see family or friends because it's gone. And he likens this as he's staying with a woman named Tamara who's helping him out, sort of get back on his feet so he can get sort of back into the new military, which is kind of a frightening thing. It's ironic that he's joining the military of his very own enemies from just maybe a year before. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of these political upheavals. But basically, he's likening the loss of his home and way of life to way Enkidu loses his way of life and loses his connection to the wilderness when he learns the ways of man from a certain priestess named Shamkat or Shamat in some translations. So Andre feels like this. as he said, in fact, I'm just going to get this quote that I have here on my doc. Let me see if I can get my mouse to work. Um, and he says, and like Enkidu, I could not return to the wilderness, not because I became a man per se, but because there was no wilderness to return to, this wilderness being our farm and homestead. And I can think he mourned his lost world as I mourned mine now.
Hmm. Exactly. I'm just
Um,
looking at the part of the book where he talks about Enkidu, and I can't find anything that relates to uh, our discussion right now. But I was hoping to find something there. But yeah, I think that's a really great quote. I mean, Enkidu is someone who is like a wild man, almost like kind of like a caveman, right? He's not very educated or used to how people live, like in a
yeah,
quote unquote
very feral.
civilized
Very
manner.
feral. I mean, he's
Yeah, he's
very
almost like a
like the animal.
beast,
Yeah, he's a
right?
beast
Yeah.
himself. He's a beast among beasts, and it got to the point where the animals were okay with him. Like, okay, he looks weird, but nothing sus.
Right. And I think the comparison to Andre is that, before he meets Tamara, he was in prison for 2 years and that really broke his soul. So, I think this is a way where he kind of learns how to go back into society, just like how, by sleeping with Shamkat, Enkidu learns how to be a man instead of a beast.
Yes, exactly, exactly. That is the perfect comparison, and that is what Andre draws that comparison, and he's really amazed
Hmm.
by the parallels because when you're reading an epic, you don't think, ah, boy, that's cool, and then it sort of happens to you, and you're like, wow, all right, like wow, that's the truth, brother.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for, yeah, Hellborn. Thank you. Yeah, it is very fascinating. I can't wait for Teti to share more about 70 Fierce Years, which, by the way, she told me yesterday that she is going to be posting some chapters onto Tapas. Finally. Like, I don't know, within the next few days or maybe even this week, right?
Well, probably in the next, I'd say beginning in February, and that's I think that's going to be in time uh sort of start the new year with that. And I'm going to start that. I'm going to start posting some chapters, and I cannot wait for you guys to meet Andre. I know you've seen
I
a little bit of him
know.
in the crossover, and I just wanted to answer everybody's questions. Riza, yes, the Chronicles of Narnia are absolutely boss. I love it. I'll always say for Narnia, no matter how old I am. Yay for vacation, yes it is. And I wanted to say, to answer Hellevorn, Andrei is influenced by the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the priestess, yes, is like Tamara. Tamara, he always compares her to Shamat or Shamkat.
Exactly. Especially since, they have a special way with sensuality, let's just say.
Yeah,
They have a
their
gift for that.
experiences and skills are rather similar.
Unparalleled.
There's a lot of parallels. Too many.
Unparalleled because they are just so good at their craft.
They are unparalleled. They are true masters of their craft. They really are.
Exactly. And Andre, being a man of the flesh, cannot resist someone who is so talented at this. He is someone who is very interested in sex and fulfilling his desires and giving other people too, giving his partner really good feelings as well, as we can see in the scene that you just recently wrote, where
Yes.
they to use Sims parlance, they woohooed for the first time.
Woohoo! They did. And it was amazing woohoo. Andre was amazed by what she did, and judging from what he saw from her, he's like, I gave good woohoo too.
Yes, I think Andre, as you said, you have more confidence in him now, because before, one of the reasons you didn't want to release him on Tapas was because you were afraid that you couldn't publish his story if you released or talked about him too much on social media.
That was my fear. That's why I didn't share anything about him, even though I had like 400 pages of content with him. I was afraid to do it because I was afraid, because some publishers are like, if this had been previously on, social media, we cannot publish it. But I think there's going to be more leeway with a lot of publishers. And I think if they really want it, I think they'll make some bend the rules a bit. And I'm not afraid anymore. I want people to know Andre, and I hope they know to come and love him as I've known to come and love him over these years. And And not only with his novel, but there's other stuff coming up with Andre too, and a lot of stuff too with Tamara, because she has truly come into her own right as her
Mhm.
own person.
She has. And, you know, just as a word of, I guess, because, you know, some people are probably curious about this. You know, one of your Inksgiving goals last year in 2021 was to release Kai's story. But I think now you're going to be focusing on Andre's, right? Are you going to be substituting that goal?
Yes, I am substituting that goal. I'm going to have to do a redact on Tapas. We, I had a revelation, and Kai and I had a very severe disagreement, and unfortunately, we will not be working with each other for a very, very long time. Kai has proven himself to be of questionable character and of heart, questionable heart, or even if he does have a heart. And I'm afraid that, well, I guess to quote the Tumblr people, he's going to jail. He's not collecting 200 on the Monopoly board. Um, and I'm glad that I am free of Kai, because unfortunately Kai was very detrimental to a lot of things.
That's
And
really a 180 because, you know, a few weeks ago, even for our Sims, you know, New Year's stream, you were still very gung ho about him.
I was sort of deluding myself, but unfortunately now, um, I've seen Kai for who he is, and all the frustrations and vexations of him, and his inconsideration and callousness and heartlessness. Meanwhile, Andre, despite his flaws, has been a very loving, kind, caring human being. And I think Andre deserves to have his narrative told, and hopefully that will, and I hope too people will get a lot out of his story, like maybe people who have gone through loss or upheavals of society or politics or whatever, or just any kind of,
Hmm.
tumultuous thing, and glean hope from that. I really hope so. So definitely doing everything with Andre and Tamara this year, just everything, everything. And you're even going to get weird things like transhumanism and Russian cosmism,
Hmm.
you know.
That's
You
very
know.
interesting. Like
Yeah.
I said, I have that book of Russian cosmism, which is basically like sci-fi related to, again, the Book of Revelation, which is very interesting. I think we should have a discussion about that sometime. But I will give it to you in person after COVID ends, along with that Mayakovsky not autobiography, sorry, biography from years
Wonderful.
ago. Yeah.
Wonderful. I cannot wait, and I can't wait for COVID to end, and I will finally get there.
I know. And then we're going to have so many podcasts in real life. Can you imagine how exciting that would be?
I can't imagine. I'm thrilled. I'm breaking into goose flesh thinking about it. I really, really am.
It's going to be really fun. I
It
can't
will.
wait. And I think it's going to happen. I mean, I really hope that it will clear up by February or March, and maybe we can meet April, May, June, something like that. I don't want to wait until December. I really don't.
No, me neither. I don't. I'm hoping spring or summer, Canada or bust. I have on my bumper sticker.
And yeah, you know, you were thinking about maybe checking out Montreal too, not just Toronto.
Yes, yes, I was. I was thinking about checking out Montreal as well as Toronto. I do want to check out what the North has to offer.
Yeah, maybe we can even do Vancouver. I know it's far away, but who knows? Maybe we can do that too.
I would love to do that. I certainly would. I really, really would.
Yeah, I haven't been to Vancouver, so it would be very interesting to check it out.
It'll be very
Yeah, it
fascinating.
will be.
Oh,
Yeah, the
yeah.
food is really great apparently, and you know the Sky Train and stuff like that. And I think I would like to see how it's like because there's some beautiful nature there too. And I guess Banff, Alberta. But oh my gosh, we're gonna be like spending like what 6 months on the road or something at this point.
On the road again. Oh, on the
Yeah,
road again.
imagine if we did a road trip movie.
We should make a road trip movie, I think. That would be amazing.
Yeah, so much to talk about, and a Euro trip movie too.
Yes. Yes, we'll have to make that and make that sort of like a travel blog journal thing and make that into a movie.
Right, because we will talk more about this in the future, but you do have plans to, you know, go to Germany maybe later this year.
I do. I do. I do have you know, go to Germany in the very, very, very near future and possibly become an expat. We'll see. Big announcements dropping that out there. And I also have very future plans to go to southern Russia. Hopefully, it's not too conflicted right now.
Well,
Maybe by the
that's
time I
true.
get there, it'll die down and they'll stop it with those stupid strike crap thing.
That's true. I hope so too. I think you will
Stop,
get there, and I
stop,
think you'll be
stop shooting
okay.
missiles. Stop it, Putin. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Haliborn, it will be amazing. I'm really excited for what this year has to offer. I already feel so optimistic. Like all these years, I mean, all these days that we've had in 2022 so far have been very good. I mean, I felt very peaceful and very optimistic.
So have I. So have I. I've never had peace like this before, in optimism and neither creative flow. Like
Hmm.
I'm like the starting of this year, I was really amped. I think you guys saw how excited I was on some of those podcasts.
And we're going to continue that streak.
Yes, yes, we will. We definitely will.
Well, thank you so much. It's only been an hour, but it felt like it was 3 hours.
It does, but it was in a good way. It was in a good way.
Thank you so much for joining Riza and Helivorn, and we
Thank
will be
you.
having more podcasts slash live streams like this. I think this is actually a more fun way to
It's
do
a fun way.
podcasts rather than just doing them on Zoom and not
We're
having any interaction except for the people who are on the show.
on the show, and we'll be doing like reaction videos. We may even watch movies and have reactions as we watch the movies.
Absolutely. Right. See you. Thank you
See
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.